2, 1. You are now live on Channel 8 and YouTube.
All right, thank you. The time is 4 o'clock on this third day of December 2024. I'm the Chairman, Justice Graves, and I call this meeting of the Capital Improvements Committee to order. Please rise and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right. In the room today is Select Board Member Tim Toth and Assistant Treasurer Collector Danielle Kirby and myself, Justice Graves at large member. So we have enough for a quorum today. In your packets are the meeting minutes of Tuesday, November 26, 2024. Has everybody had a chance to review the minutes?
I did, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Danielle?
Yeah.
Okay. Does anybody have any comments or anything to revise?
Oh, looks good.
All right. If there's no comments or discussion, I would entertain a motion related to the meeting minutes.
Make a motion, we accept the meeting minutes for November 26, 2024 as presented.
All right, I have a motion made and seconded. Do I have any discussion on the motion? All right. Going once, going twice. 3 times, hearing no discussion on the motion. How do you vote, Tim?
Yes.
Danielle?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. That was unanimous 3-0. We have nothing for the fire department or EMS this evening. I did send an email yesterday and I haven't received anything, and I checked with Holly. So the only things on our agenda for tonight are to finalize our recommendations, finalize the capital improvement plan, and to finalize our report. Agenda items number 4, 5, and 6, which, considering the interrelated nature of those, we'll talk about all 3 of those freely tonight between those categories. But what I will go over again is what we need to do. We need to figure out what type of comments we're going to make within the proposed report, including any final observations to get to the Select Board and Advisory Committee. We need to create and update a capital improvement plan for the next 5 fiscal years, FY27 through FY31, and then determine our FY 2026 capital project recommendations. With that, in your packet, there is a slightly updated version of the capital report with what we had voted on at the last meeting on the 26th. All of the non-tax impacting requests are reflected in there. I haven't put them in the FY26 section yet, but they are in the capital plan section on pages 12 and 13. You will notice that, just for information's sake, because more information is always better than no information. I did label all of the projects that have been presented in the report out of 9 different categories: feasibility studies, design, land acquisitions, construction buildings, construction highway. When I categorized construction highway, it was pretty much anything that had to do with the roads, under the roads, or over the roads, like cable lines, or under the roads, like sewer and water lines, and anything connected to the roads, like pavement or that kind of infrastructure, like sidewalks. Construction land improvements, anything that's an improvement that's not onto a major building that we have in town. Regular department equipment, anything vehicular, anything moving. And then 9 is pretty much a catch-all for anything else, such as software or any other type of upgrades. Mostly software, but anything that didn't really fit nicely in the other 8. With that, I also had sent out kind of a summary of the last 5 fiscal years, and a summary of what we've kind of gotten for requests over the years, so we can see what we've received. And then we can also see what town meeting has funded fiscal year 2021 through fiscal year 2025 since that period has occurred. And then the only other thing, and this was a carryover from the last meeting, is just a draft comment to put into the report that I had written. It doesn't have to be like this. It might not, if the committee didn't want it in the report, it doesn't have to be in the report. I didn't put it in the draft report. But we did talk extensively about the low amount of funding in the retained earnings and the issues regarding that. So I just wanted to highlight that. With that being said, I think I've talked quite a bit. Just to start us off, with any of the information that's been provided tonight, are there any observations or anything that any of the committee members want to lead off with?
Very thorough compilation. Thank you for the summary.
Yeah, no problem.
Going back through the couple years worth I had, it's like I had a start to this, but you had access to a little more info than I did.
Yeah, what you actually, just so that everybody's aware, the summary of the past town meeting actions, I went through all of the special town meetings and the following annual town meetings. None of the things that we typically have is extra meetings outside of the fall town meeting, even though the fall town meeting is also a special town meeting. Those didn't have any capital items that we had approved on those within the last so many years. But every fall and annual town meeting did have some items. I did put a comment that going back as far as about fiscal year 2022, you'll notice that there is a huge jump in the amount of requests. That was in both totality and in also what is listed on the town meetings prior approval sheets. That is because back then the committee used to look at and send out a memo stating that we look at anything 5,000 and up. The bylaw states that it's anything that's $10,000 and up, and that was something that was changed in the middle there. So in terms of crossing between 5 years back to now, you do see sort of a jump there. Some of those items that are listed as capital being approved from prior years have been approved in subsequent years, but are either in the general operating budget as a line item for smaller capital expenses of less than 10,000, such as the street sign replacements. Bob does those every year, but you don't see those listed on, following annual town meetings because those weren't capital requests going into fiscal year, 23 and so on, because that's typically under $10,000. So just a comment on that. But other than that, some observations that I sort of just have looking at the very last page, the comparison by year of just the total amount of requests we get. We get quite a few in the categories of buildings, highway, land improvements, and then also vehicular. We very rarely ever get feasibility studies, or we've never had anybody, any town department approach us for any land acquisitions. So just some things that I wanted to note there. I actually think, looking at this, that the comparison of the total number of requests by year and what categories they're in, which is the very last sheet on the summary statistics of current and past capital item counts. I think that should be in the report, because I think the selectmen should see what type of volume of requests we're getting and in what categories that is. Mostly just to see where our departments most
Feel like they're lacking.
right, exactly, because there's clearly a pattern in there if you're looking from the past several years.
Agreed.
So does anybody want that included in the report? I'm just thinking off the top of my head right now.
Oh, absolutely. It's a
Okay.
great snapshot, and it also highlights what's going on.
Right. So I'm thinking just putting that final comparison by year would be useful. We don't need to, I did it just for my own sanity, just broke it out individually by year in the earlier pages, but I will include that comparison by year, and I think it would fit best. I think it might fit best as its own kind of section to point to the selectmen to right before the capital improvement plan. So between sections 5 and 6, it would become section 6, and then you have section 7 and 8. I think that would be a good place for it, if that makes any sense.
The other consideration will be between 2 and 3, right behind process and
All
everything.
right, frame process narrative. All right.
Either place, I mean, it highlights what's there. It also helps to show the importance of this committee.
Right.
I don't think everybody realizes this is the actual start of the budgetary season and process.
So I'm thinking like going, like I said, 5 and 6.
Mhm.
Just to, because most people, if most people are looking at this, oh, okay, yeah, the process narrative, the department narratives, which are important, but they're going to want to know, okay, what's your plan and what are your recommendations? Well, if it's right before then they're going to see that and get the hint that that's a little bit more critical. So I guess I'll ask by consensus. Does anybody have any objections if I add that to the report like that? No. All right.
Nope.
6 comparison by year. 7, it's gonna be 8. Okay. That's your report. With that, I'm also thinking it may be wise to put I don't think we've ever done a summary of past actions that the town has taken in a report, and I don't think anyone's kept, like you said, you said that you were looking back at documentation and trying to track it, but I don't think anybody's ever put it in any of our reports. I don't think it's been in any of the town reports, period. I think it might be, if the committee wants to add the summary of past actions of town meetings to the report as well, maybe as an appendix or otherwise. Just so that you're not only seeing year to year, but you're also seeing, okay, where have we been? Where are we going? It doesn't need to be added to every year. It could be the prior year, what, we made our FY26 recommendations, what actually happened on town meeting on annual and fall town meeting, and add that to the next year and so on and so forth. But I don't think that's as important as the comparison by year, but I don't know. Does anybody have any objections to us adding that entire document to it?
I think they're equally important, and you would add that as an appendix after section 7.
Well, yeah, section 7, now section 8, but yeah, I can add that as an appendix.
Either way, an appendix or its own standalone section, it works either way.
Okay. Danielle, do you have a problem with that?
No.
Oh, all right, so then we'll do that by consensus. If anyone doesn't have, so that'll be appendix. Summary.
If you wanted it as a motion, I would move that.
Okay, well, we can do it that way too. So you make a motion to add the summary of past actions as an appendix to the report. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, so we have a motion, we have a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll go to the vote. Danielle, how do you vote?
Yes.
Tim?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. That was unanimous 3-0. Gotta find where I am right now. Yeah. All right, so this will be the appendix. Okay, with that, I think another good place to start off from is the workshop comment just regarding the discussion we had at the last meeting. Has everybody had a chance to read that in its entirety? It's regarding the TCTV capital funding. If you were to look at the very last section of our draft report, I do have a section for committee comments. We can make more of them this evening, or we can have none. Just because making our recommendations may not be enough to express what we're thinking, even in terms of the capital plan or the individual recommendations. And I know that we had talked about including a comment in the report. So I'm just not sure if this is what the committee was looking for, or we could scrap that and write something else, like and workshop something else, or what do we want to do? I'll kind of just leave it off there.
Speaking as a citizen, not as a member of this board at the moment or committee, I would like to see on the very first sentence, the committee report recommend the funding of TCTV's capital requests. I would just say the funding of TCTV. It's a town department. Let's start treating it like a town department. Because looking backwards for the last 6-7 years, we've never really funded it. It's relied on its enterprise fund and its income through the cable subscriptions and the defrayment there, but we've never really funded it as a department.
I mean, I'll speak as a committee member.
Mhm.
We had talked a lot about the retained earnings because that's typically where capital is funded from for this department. Well, they've used all of their retained earnings to fund their operating budget this year.
Yep.
So, I mean, in terms of the scope of this committee, I don't disagree with what you're saying as a citizen. But in terms of the scope of this committee, regardless of whether it's their operating budget or their capital needs, you know, that particular retained earnings situation is not good for the future. And quite honestly, they can't fund almost anything that they've requested for capital without dipping into other resources. So while our recommendation may be for them to use enterprise funds, the reality is, unless they have more going into fiscal year 26 that they could use at the fall town meeting, of 2025, they're just not going to be able to fund some of these. So I don't know. But I hear what you're saying, Tim.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Relying on the enterprise funds, we've been watching the last few years, it's dwindling because the subscriptions are dwindling, the contribution back.
Right.
And the offset is dropping. So to quote my grandmother, God rest her soul, we're robbing Peter to pay Paul. Well, we've reached the point where Peter's broke too, and he can't help Paul out anymore.
Right. Right. Danielle, do you have any observations about it or no?
No.
I mean, just because of the scope of this committee, I
Hmm.
wouldn't change how I started it. But again, I totally understand your point.
No, that's,
Is there anything else within it that jumps out at you that you'd like to comment on or that you think we should change or? And the only reason I kind of really, not to interrupt if you were about to speak, Tim, the only reason I really focus on this is because if this happened to any other enterprise fund, I mean, we kind of need a plan. I mean, it's not as if we only have one enterprise fund in this town and it's the cable enterprise fund. We have several. So that's my only concern, is that we can't not have a plan to rectify these issues. And I don't know. I mean, it goes beyond capital. I mean, this is an operating budget issue that's manifesting itself in the retained earnings.
yes.
I don't know what other way to put it.
No, and you drive it home very nicely, the second to the last sentence in this paragraph.
Well, that's just the reality. It will
Well,
be,
it is the reality, and that's where I was alluding to with the upfront in the first one, but you've addressed it here as well.
I mean, I think it was said at the last meeting, Steve had said, oh, I won't spend more than what I have. Well, what happens if you need to spend more than what you have? Well, then you deficit spend and then it has to be raised. So.
Yeah, but he can't deficit spend legally, so.
Right.
It's a.
Right.
It's a non-correcting problem.
Correct. So. If there's no other comments on this, I think it would be wise if we took a vote to include this comment in our report.
So moved.
Okay, I'll second that. So the motion on the floor is to put the comment regarding TCTV capital funding within the capital report, specifically from the comments section on the last page. It's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion on that? All right, seeing no discussion, how do you vote, Danielle?
Yes.
Tim?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. That was unanimous 3-0. So that'll be added in the report. All right. Now that we've gotten through those things, what we have in front of us on the master sheet that you see printed out in front of you are the 33 requests that we've had this year. Some of them, specifically items 19, 20, and then 24 through 32 have already been approved at our last meeting, and we need to decide with our capital budget what we're going to recommend for this year, and then what our future recommendations or suggested planning may be. With that, I know that at the last meeting, we talked about the meals tax with regards to item 1, the police vehicle replacement, which the chief has stated it's going to be done through the ARPA funds this year. And then also the item number 5, utility pickup. And we had talked about the purpose of the meals tax, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tim, but that it was meant for the police vehicles and then for small highway trucks, correct?
That was my understanding,
not-
yes. That was back 2015, 2016 era
Okay,
when we first proposed the meals tax.
okay. So with that, the police chief is recommending or is planning to move forward with the police vehicle being done through the use of ARPA funds. Which frees it up for us to use it for the utility truck. So I don't know, what are people thinking about in terms of a recommendation on that? Do we want to recommend the utility truck for the meals tax and recommend the police vehicle as is for the ARPA funds this year?
I would say yes,
Okay,
just speaking out loud, because those are actually fenced funds, and that will not have a negative impact on our very dwindling available amount
Correct.
for capital use.
correct. And actually, I have my own comments on meals tax that I'll give after we figure this out. But Danielle, how do you feel about the police vehicle being used from ARPA funds this year?
I agree.
Okay. Especially since we're going to lose those ARPA funds if we don't commit them. So we need to have contract in hand soon. And by soon, I mean December 31st. So with that, I would make a motion to recommend the police vehicle replacement for the FY 2026 capital budget to be funded from ARPA funds. Second. All right. I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All right, going once, going twice, going 3 times. All right. With there being no further discussion, I'll go to the vote. How do you vote, Tim?
Yes.
How do you vote, Danielle?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. That was unanimous 3-0. All right, with that, I'll mark that. So, meals tax. So, I know that there's been a lot of discussion about the meals tax. I know that we've always talked about it passing through as free cash for our capital purposes in this committee. And I know, just to remind everyone, we have 300 to about 325 for capital use this year. My only comment on that is that looking at, and this was at the select boards, I think it was their last meeting or a couple meetings ago, the revenue sheets has the meal tax on it. And I brought this up at the last meeting, but we don't if we know that an income source is coming in and we know what its estimate is, we don't need to wait for free cash at the end of the year to raise and appropriate for that item. So my recommendation, if we're going to vote on the utility pickup, is that it's voted on as a raise and appropriate, not as a transfer of free cash. Because if we're truly using the meals tax, why would we estimate it and then not use it like that? That's my only comment. But we can still take that into account when we make our capital use recommendations, just in case, but I think that just doesn't make any sense. So I don't know what other people are thinking.
Trying to think how to word it. And I wish we had somebody from the finance team here who we could bounce this to, but the change that was discussed at a couple of the select board meetings, I know the advisory had some words on it as well, because the way the free cash has been designated and it always been the pass through of the meals tax into free cash.
Right.
But you're right, it is a revenue stream and it should be accounted for to show as a revenue stream. But again, it's one of those, what are we gonna get? Don't know. You know, historically, it's increasing. People are buying more and spending more. We're seeing that, but that could easily take a nosedive
Correct.
just like that. But yeah, I think for budgeting, balance sheet purposes, yes, we need to be able to see it.
Right, and I know that that's difficult. My only other
Mhm.
comment will be is that, yes, you don't have enough in meals tax, so your meals tax amount can vary anywhere from 0 to whatever your full estimate is or above your
Yep.
estimate. But that's not the only source of revenue that has one-time increases in this town that I haven't looked at the revenue sheet that closely in the past couple of days. And I know that the select board had just approved it, but like I know for FY25, the building permits went up because of the anticipated Baldwinville Elementary School project. Well, one-time increase should be used for one-time purposes, not for a general fund event or for a general fund appropriation, like to support the general fund, because that's not necessarily going to be there next year. You have one Baldwinville School Elementary School project. And once that's done, you're not going to get building permits like that again. So that one-time increase isn't anticipated. But if you have multiple things that are like that in a line, you may vary a little bit on the meals tax, but you have other things that are one-time funds as well that we're basing the revenue streams off of. So that's just my only observation, is that you could theoretically raise and appropriate. And maybe it uses all of the meals tax, maybe it doesn't. For that year's revenue stream, but you have other one-time revenues that aren't going to be there next year that we're basing the budget off of sometimes. So I don't know, but I definitely think we need to change something with how we do the meals tax appropriations. That's just my thinking. I don't know if anyone has any comments. I'm not dead set on this. I'm just saying that I'm just thinking about it a little bit differently this time.
It's a good point. I think we do need to follow the spirit and intent of why the meals tax was originally approved by
Right.
the voters, and that was the police and the light highway vehicles.
Right,
So to stay within that confine,
right. Danielle, do you have any comments on that?
No. I just think we have to, like, not to copy what Kim said, but basically this is what the residents voted for, so.
Right, but if we're anticipating that in the revenues, then this is what we should be putting those revenues towards more directly.
Yeah.
That's why I'm suggesting the raise and appropriate. Because if it's on the revenue sheets, That's kind of my only comment on that, but,
It's a valid point.
right. So I don't know. I mean, it seems like we want to vote for the utility pickup to be used for meals tax. So does anyone want to make a motion related to that?
I will move that we approve item 5 for the highway department, the utility pickup, and the source of funding is as the town has requested and specified through the use of the meals tax.
And just to clarify that motion, Tim, would that be lowering our capital use budget, or are we so we're saying we're doing the meals tax. Are we taking that into consideration? Like, is that lowering our 300 to 325 capital use? Or are we just doing that as more of a standalone that we've got to figure out?
Well, in years past, I would say that would have an impact because that was rolled to the free cash. But if it's truly the last BVA that I saw, where it has its own standalone line item, that should not be impacting our free cash, unless I'm misunderstanding.
Yeah, I would have to look at the BVA to
Yep.
know what item you're talking about. You know what, why don't we do that? So we have the motion. Does anybody second that motion?
Second.
Second, all right, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Why don't we account for it within 300 to 325K? But then I think that there should be a comment within the report regarding this. Because I think that has gone on for a number of years. So with that being said, we have a motion made and seconded. Is there any further discussion?
Just want to make sure we're not cutting our nose off to spite our face with all of the TCTV things we talked about the last time.
Right,
Those numbers add up rather quickly.
they do. That. All right, with no further discussion, we'll go to the vote. How do you vote, Danielle?
Yes.
Tim?
Yes.
All right, and I vote yes as well. That was 3-0. That was unanimous. And I know we just voted to recommend that for FY 2026. Because we're kind of anticipating that out of our capital budget. Is everyone by consensus okay with me ranking it as number 1 on the list, considering it should be? I'm just trying to think of that.
I'm good with that.
Okay, Danielle, you okay with that? All right, so we'll put that as number 1. And then I would ask that that we enter a comment regarding that the selectmen need to more transparently use the meals tax for the police vehicles and small highway trucks as the voters wanted, and just sort of drive that point home a little bit further. We can either workshop language, or I can, if everyone's comfortable with how I've written things in the past, I can write something to that effect. But that's up to the committee. Danielle, do you have any objection to like that? Okay, no. Tim? Oh,
That's fine.
are you ready?
You're
doing some math.
I'm crunching some fast numbers here.
That's okay. So we can either do that by consensus, or we can take a vote to add a comment like that. I'll move to let the chairman add a comment regarding the use of meals tax in the capital report in the comments section. So that's my motion.
I'll second it.
Okay. So. Right. Is there any discussion on the motion on the floor? And no, Danielle? All right, with that motion, I'll go to the vote. Tim, how do you vote?
Yes.
Danielle?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. That motion passed 3-0 unanimously. All right. So with that, we've only bit off only a little bit of what we have going here. So does anybody? I don't want to control the whole conversation. Is there anything that jumps out to anybody that should be in here? Because I have some thoughts on how we can proceed, but
I personally think we need to take into consideration the senior center generator.
okay, that's a good point. I think that we need to take into consideration Berry Road design work since that grant we just got awarded. But we need to put in our capital plan that if we're going to support the Berry Road design work on item number 8, that we need to be willing to put money aside for fixing Berry Road. Because it doesn't make any sense for us to go out and do a design and then several years later, at least not be reiterating the point that we need to fund this. But that's just my item that I'm thinking of.
No, you're absolutely right. Securing a grant, whether it's a fully funded or a matched grant, more and more are becoming matching grants. We have an obligation and a commitment to show that we're serious. But then spending that amount of money and then letting it fester is kind of a fruitless effort.
No,
I
that is-
agree with you.
And that design's only going to last forever.
Correct.
And then the standards are going to change. And we're going to have to do it all over again.
Yep.
I mean, that's kind of pointless. So, but to Danielle's point, the senior center generator, we need to fund that because that's our emergency shelter and it's not capable of doing that right now. So it's 94. So, yep. It's the taxpayer contribution. Yes. Please. So if we take off line number 5, which we had just approved, we have about 230,000 left in capital. The Berry Road design work for this year is $10,000. Obviously, that's going to have planning in the future. And the senior center generator is 75,000 approximately. We could recommend both of those. I would recommend, if we did do it, I would suggest that maybe the senior center generator is recommended as item number 2, and that the Berry Road design work is number 3 in the list, if we're going to have to number these.
Agreed.
Okay. Does anyone want to make a motion on that?
I would move that we recommend the funding from the source of free cash, line item 13 for buildings and grounds, senior center generator, amount of 75,000. And line number 8 for highway, the Berry Road design work in the amount of 10,000
Okay,
for total appropriation of $85,000.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Once, twice, 3 times. With that, we'll go to the vote. How do you vote, Danielle?
Yes.
How do you vote, Tim?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. That was unanimous, 3-0. So this is gonna be number 3. This is gonna be number 2. 1,000. 75. So with that, that leaves us only about 145,000 left for capital use, with the rest of these items for FY 2026. What I would like to take a moment and ask the committee is, we may not have a number because we don't know how much the design of Berry Road is, but is there, so let's say starting in FY 29, should we recommend that starting in FY 2029 and forward, that the town should start either saving money or putting money away, or strategizing how to use our Chapter 90 funds in conjunction with that to actually repair Berry Road once the design work's done. Because it's going to be expensive. And we know if we're going to approve the design work that that's going to be coming up in a few years. So,
I would accelerate that date to 27 or 28. I wouldn't push it out to 29.
okay.
That 3 years is gonna be more of a nuisance than a help,
Okay.
because prices are just gonna continue to increase and stair step on us.
Right. It's basically, as soon as we have that design, we need to, I mean, that would be my thinking. As soon as we have that design within the next year or so, when everything's done.
Yep.
We need to start putting money away for it. And we need to anticipate that. I mean, like I said, we don't know the cost yet, but I can mark that off on the capital plan to anticipate that we need to start putting away for that. Keeping in mind that when we're recommending for future years, it doesn't mean that the plan will stay like that. We could, in an ideal world, we would be funding it sooner, but that's not what's going to end up happening. Just me kind of being a cynic there, but at least then it starts warning the selectmen and the advisory committee, and it warns the next committee that they've got to take a look at that and actually. So with that being said, for the capital improvement plan, I would move to recommend to start funding for the Berry Road design, or for the Berry Road work in fiscal year 2028 and on. So that's my motion. Does anybody? Second. All right. Berry Road design, or not Berry Road design, Berry Road. Does anyone have any comments regarding the motion on the floor that's been made and seconded? Danielle? Tim?
I have none.
Okay. So on the motion made and seconded, how do you vote, Danielle?
Yes.
How do you vote, Tim?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. All right. So I will mark that on the capital improvement plan. So for FY 28 and forward. So start to fund. All right. With that, we have $145,000 left, approximately in capital. What else is jumping out to us in terms of the projects that we're seeing on here?
Lines 11 and 12 rank high on my
Yes.
own perception of this. We've been kicking these windows around for at least 4 years, and we started discussions on this parking lot about 4 or 5 years ago. And yet, here we sit.
Yeah, no, if you look at like, I don't know, the FY 22 or the FY 21
Mhm.
requests, it's been on, I think it's even been on since FY 2019. I swear I
I-
saw that. in
yep.
that. Yeah.
Yep.
So. Yeah, I mean, we can keep delaying it.
Only for so long.
Yeah, no kidding. Plus, at the end of the day, if we don't do the window replacement at some point, that's gonna negatively impact the building, so. I don't know, Danielle, how do you feel about that? What are you thinking?
I agree. However, I would probably put 12 before 11. Only because, well, I'm not gonna say only because, but I witnessed someone
Oh, that's right,
last week.
right, when that person fell outside the
Fell.
building.
Cause they hit whatever in the parking lot.
Yeah. That's a good point.
I'll echo that. I know at least 2 incidents on the sidewalk coming in over here by the pavilion area. In 2018, 2019, some folks fell on that sidewalk as well. I mean, there's been some work done to it, but
So I mean, I'm inclined to support doing item number 12 for FY 26's capital requests. The windows need to be done. Could we take a look at that later as we're going through other recommendations? Because that, I'd hate to say this, but that's actually a lot cheaper than some of the other items on here. And I don't know where we're gonna end up in terms of free cash amounts. So that might be something to look at more towards the end. Not that that's not important, but
You said the windows?
yeah, the windows later, more towards the end as opposed to right now, but I would say that item number 12 would be important. So. I would entertain a motion on whatever the committee feels like in terms of whether it be item number 12 or any combination there too.
I would move we put forward item 12 for the town hall pavement and the permanent sidewalk.
Do I have a second on that motion?
Second.
Motion made and seconded on item number 12. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll go to the vote. And I'll switch up. I'll vote first. So I vote yes. Danielle? You vote.
Yes.
Tim?
Yes.
All right, that was unanimous, 3-0. So with that, we take out item number 12. There is about 96,000 left that we could recommend. And just so that everyone's clear, I'm gonna rank number 12 as 4 on the list, if everyone's okay with that. Just so that we're aware. Are both of you okay with that ranking item number 12 as a number 4?
Yep.
Okay, Danielle?
Yep.
Yep, all right. With that. Is there any particular item on here that stands out to anyone that we haven't approved yet? That we want to start talking about? What I'm going to suggest, if there are any items that we're really having trouble with, if we want to recommend them or not in this year. Keep in mind that we've still got to do a capital plan from FY 2026 through FY 2031. It doesn't mean that we have to stick to it. However, it would be important for the committee to do so. We could recommend some of these to a future year. We don't know what our free cash is. It's going to be subject to that at the end of the day. But at least then we're putting dates on these where we may be recommending these and pushing these forward, as opposed to just we get to $0 on our capital budget and then we do nothing. But there's a couple of these that I'm looking at. Like items number 17 and 18. They're talking about getting money from free cash. But if anyone remembers from a few town meetings ago, they were able to use CPC funding and use match grants for that, which they also listed match grants. And I think I'd have to look at the forms again, but I think it did list CPC as a possible funding source. I know that item number 16 talks about that as well. We could do similar to what we did with the TCTV requests on 16, 17, and 18 and recommend them. But that they should only, that we're not recommending them for free cash, that they need to be done through match grants and available funding through CPC. Because that's the only way those are going to be feasible, because we're talking, you know, lower end of the spectrum, 200K for two of these items, and then one of them is 75,000 approximately. So that's just not something that free cash is going to be able to handle in the near future. So does anyone have any thoughts on that? Tim?
Yeah, grants would be a true non-taxpayer funded expense.
Correct. CPC is a taxpayer.
Is a taxpayer funded expense. That's where I have a challenge getting across number 16. Do I think it needs to be done? Yes. Do I think we can do it this year? No.
No.
Next year, maybe, if we can come up with the funding source.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, start projecting this out, and we need to start building all of these out.
Correct. Well, maybe that's a good point. Maybe those we recommend it for match grant. I mean, match grants and such, they're going to take time anyway. It probably wouldn't even work for the FY 2026 cycle. But we could, and I don't know what CPC has available, although that's up to them whether they recommend something to town meeting for. I
think we're early enough in the process. We could definitely hit the 2026 cycle.
Right. You could hit the 2026 cycle. But I mean, for those bigger ones, I mean, do we suggest recommending them out like, the town should start thinking about this in FY 2027, 2028, 2029. I'm looking mainly at number 17 and 18 because those are much bigger ticket items, even if you go at the lower scale of the 200,000.
Yeah. And if we went to the far end of 2027 and the early end of 2018 with an overlap in there, I think it's doable.
You mean 2028, not
Or
2028?
2028.
That's okay.
Sorry.
No, that's fine.
Looking at one thing and saying something else.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we could recommend it at the later end of FY 2027, going into FY 2028 for both 17 and 18, exclusively through match grants
Mhm.
and CPC funding, if the committee was interested in recommending it that way. Or planning for it that way. Now, at this point, we're going into the capital plan.
Mhm.
So, Danielle, do you have any comments or concerns about that?
Nope.
Tim? I know you would just suggest that.
Yep.
Kind of. No, I think that's a good idea.
Definitely need to push it out.
We do. Plus, we got to keep in mind that we can approve. This has always been a discussion with the town, is we can approve as many things as we want, and town meeting can approve whatever is within its capabilities. But if we have too many things going on simultaneously, you have a throughput issue. So we're just going to have things sitting there, not getting done. So pushing that out might be a good idea. At least in terms of throughput of how many projects that we're doing. But that's just kind of my observation.
No, it's a good observation. It's a symptom of a much wider cause.
Right.
You know, committee, we can recommend. I agree with you. There is a throughput, but
Right.
we need to see a plan on how to fix that throughput capability as well.
Right.
And that's outside of the purview.
Oh, yeah,
of
that's
this-
totally
of
outside
this
of
committee.
this. I'm just thinking about it from all, you know.
Yeah,
when we-
lots of moving pieces to
Yeah.
the puzzle. Absolutely.
So. Does anyone want to make a motion related to items number 17 and 18? And for everybody out, online, item number 17 is the Houghton Park Baseball Field, and number 18 is the skate park. So we're talking about adding that to the plan, but not as a recommendation for FY 2026 exclusively.
I would move we add those to the plan, but a recommendation late 2027 into 2028.
All right, so you're moving that. Does anybody second that?
Second.
Do you want to add anything more specific with regards to CPC funding or match grants, or just do you want to leave your motion as is, Tim?
I think we can leave it as is.
Okay.
What, you know, we've discussed the possibility of CPA match grants always. Well, we can make the recommendation they pursue match grants.
Right, exactly. Yeah, they have
I
to.
mean, that doesn't mean they're gonna follow it, but we can recommend.
Okay. So, on items. Eight. All right. Is there any further discussion on the motion? All right, hearing none, how do you vote, Tim?
Yes.
How do you vote, Danielle?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. That's 3-0. All right. Check this off. Item number 16. What are we thinking in terms of recommendation for that? Because I know they're looking at possibly CPA funding. And for anyone wondering, item number 16 is the Gilman Waite softball fields infield mix replacement. My thought on it is make it an FY 2027 recommendation or add it to the FY 2027 on the capital plan. That's my only thought on it, but I don't know what other people are thinking.
I think that's another one. We need to pursue the matching grants.
Yeah. I guess what I'll also mention is there anything on here that we just outright would not recommend? I don't think that there is anything that screams out to me, but just out of all the requests that we've had, is there anything that anyone just would not recommend that we pursue? Whether it be for FY 2026 or the future.
I have one, not that we not recommend, but looking at number 33 for the Boynton Library, the enhancements.
Right.
We never did get a dollar amount back
Right, on the electrical work,
on
right?
the electrical work. I think we should make that a focus for 2027.
Okay. All right. So by focus, do you mean, that we're recommending it onto the plan for FY 2027 to review, or,
Yes.
okay. So. And are you making a motion on that, Tim?
I will make that a
You will
motion.
make that motion? Okay. All right, so we have a motion. I'll second that motion. So we have a motion on the floor. Is there any discussion?
Can you say the fiscal year one more time? I'm sorry.
Fiscal year 2027 to
Thank
review it in fiscal year 2027.
Okay.
Not that we're, this is a little bit different. Instead of recommend, because we don't know a dollar amount.
Right.
So we can't really recommend anything for it. And I do want to point out the possible funding sources. They should have been listed on there. I believe that they have their library grant funds, and then they also have CPC funds for library renovation. That was on the form. But we don't have a dollar amount for the Boynton Library. What I would say is that they have the quote for the design of the electrical system, and for the renovations that need to be done over there. So my only thought process is maybe we recommend only the design work in FY 26, which they already have separate funding for. And then we have to look at what their final product is going to be in FY 2027 and what that dollar amount's going to be before we can spread that out, if that makes any sense. But I agree with Tim. We can't do anything with a project like that.
No, I just caution even for the design work, spending the money now, but then codes change and the compliance and the ability to meet that design may or may not be feasible.
Well, then we can keep that as is then.
Yep.
All right. Is there any further discussion? Danielle, do you have any thoughts? No? All right. So on the motion, to review the Boynton Library renovations, in FY 2027, how do you vote, Tim?
Yes.
All right, Danielle,
Yes.
I vote yes as well. All right, so that's 3-0. I'll mark that. So going back to, is there anything further that we want to discuss? Reimbursement grant after appropriation.
Item 23.
Yep,
The upgraded software for the automated building systems management.
yep,
And specifically, that's the TES building
mhm.
at NRSD's request. if that system is truly at the end of its service life, we really don't have a heck of a lot of choice on it. That needs to be
Yep.
this coming fiscal year.
Yeah.
That's just my thought on it.
Yeah, I agree. Danielle, what are you thinking on that?
Agreed.
Okay. So does anyone want to make a motion relative to line item number 23, update software for automated building systems management at TES? I will add that to the forms.
I will make that a motion, and the funding source unfortunately will need to be free cash.
Yep. All right, we have a motion made. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Great, seeing none, we will go to the vote. How do you vote, Danielle?
Yes.
How do you vote, Tim?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. 0. So with that being said. And on our rankings, I'm going to rank it as number 5 since that's the next item that we just voted on. If everyone's okay with that, unless you want to switch up the rankings. Tim, are you okay with that? Tim, are you okay with that being ranked?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Danielle?
Yep.
Okay, so we're good with that. All right, so that leaves about 86,000 left, 86,999 at the highest end. I'm looking at the bulletproof vest replacement, item number 2. We get reimbursed after we do it, so it is an upfront cost. But I think that we should fund that.
Oh, absolutely. Can't ask them to do the job if we're not going to give them the tools to
Yeah,
do
no
the job.
Danielle, how do you think about
I
that?
agree. Yeah.
Okay. So that would be recommendation number 6, for fiscal year 2026. I will make a motion to recommend line item number 2, the bulletproof vest replacement for fiscal year 2026.
Second.
All right, we have a motion made and seconded. And number 2. Is there any further discussion? All right, hearing no further discussion, how do you vote, Tim?
Yes.
Danielle?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well.
I'm trying to write.
That's okay. Where are we going here? That's what we did. That's what we're doing. So that gives us about 75,000 left. If we're sticking strictly to what we've got. So let's get some. Is there anything else that we're looking at on here that that should be recommended to a future fiscal year? Or that should be planned out to a future fiscal year?
I'm thinking 6 and 7,
Yeah,
the pair of F-750 plow standard dump trucks and that front end loader, 2027, 2028. And yeah, I realize on a hope and a prayer that the current loader doesn't show out in between now and then, but
right.
the money's just not there.
No,
That's,
it's not. So do we want to, I would recommend the front end loader sooner in FY 2027. I hate to say this, but at some point, do we do multiple appropriations in 27, 28, and 29 to get to a number that we can actually purchase this with? Because otherwise we're just never gonna get there. But that's just my thought. We can recommend, or we can start planning out the front end loader in FY 2027 if the committee wants to do that. And then I would think about the F-750s. We can start talking about those, I think, in FY 2028's planning, I think, at this point. Does that make sense?
Yep, even if we split those, one in 27, one in 28.
Yep. Danielle, how do you think about that?
I agree.
Okay. Does anyone want to make a motion relative to that?
I'll make the motion.
Okay.
Now we look at lines 6 and 7 for the highway department. The 2 F-750 plow sander dump trucks and a front end loader. To 2027, possibility of one of the 2 trucks in 2028.
All right. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. I was gonna say if you weren't gonna second it, I was gonna. All right. So we have a motion made and seconded. Do we have any further comments? Tim?
I do not.
Okay, Danielle?
No.
Now, the only comment I'll give is I know that we've had a lot of conversation around the F-750s. I think it'd be good. One, we just don't have the funding for it. And 2, those numbers just sticker shock on that is just amazing, not in a good way. I think recommending that for 27 and 2028 is better. And then I also think we've got to look at it. I know that Bob wants the diesel trucks, but I know there's also been some conversations about gas. That might be a better conversation for next year. I don't want to recommend something outside of that without the department head's input, but I think that that's something further we've got to talk about in the future when we start planning that.
I agree with you. I also agree with your sticker shock comment because the upfit is more expensive than the big.
And the
vehicle.
actual, yeah,
That's where I was.
it's over 100%.
That makes it a little tougher to to palate and accept that one.
Yep.
But unfortunately, that's the way it is.
All right. Does anybody else have any other comments? No? All right, with that, we have the motion on the floor for items number 6 and second, the F-750 plow and sander and the front end loader to be recommended for fiscal years 2027 and 2028. How do you vote, Tim?
Yes.
How do you vote, Danielle?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. All right. That 6 and 7. With that. The radar trailer replacement. I'm looking at line item number 3.
I was just looking at that.
I know it says insurance settlement and free cash, and I know that it's damaged and we need to replace it. I mean, it's. So I guess on the merits, just do we want to recommend that for FY 2026? I would think so, but I don't know how everybody else is feeling about that. My question, of course, is mainly the source of funding, if I'm being completely honest. I know that we've been told about the insurance settlement.
Mhm.
I'm going to ask you, Tim, has that gone in front of the selectmen at all? Or
I have not seen or heard anything on that.
okay. So that's my only concern there.
Removing my selectman's hat as a citizen in a compulsory insurance state, I think the insurance settlement should be covering this. That's just my 2 cents worth. You know, if I hit something with my truck, I fully expect to have to take care of it.
Correct.
That's a fact of life.
That's the only thing that kind of, well, one, we need to do it, but two, if we are gonna recommend it, I would recommend it for the full amount because I don't want to take any chances because this just seems unusual, I guess is my comment on that. But in terms of what the end source of funding will be, that's kind of out of our hands, but I would recommend it for the full $8,728.50 for the replacement. Because I don't want us to not budget for that. And then I don't know why we wouldn't have anything for that, but rather measure twice than cut once.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. You know what? I'll move it. I move to recommend line item number 3, the police radar trailer replacement for the full amount in FY 2026 of $8,728.50 from certified free cash.
Friendly amendment
Yep.
or a friendly comment toward your amendment
Mhm.
that we maximize the insurance settlement to offset that amount.
So I get what you're saying, Tim.
Mhm.
But my only concern is that, I mean, we got presented on this at least over a month ago,
Mhm.
and we still haven't seen the insurance settlement.
Yeah, but this accident was months ago and that's
Right.
another concern. We
That's
still
another
haven't seen an insurance settlement. That's.
Right, that's the other
Yeah.
thing. I don't, like, I get what you're saying to offset it.
Yep.
So I'll amend my motion, or I'll kind of, so I guess, how about we just let my motion fail and then I'll do a no motion. So my motion's on the floor. Does anybody second it? Going once? Going twice?
I'll second it.
They'll second it. Okay. Then what I would suggest as an amendment to that is, I want us to budget in capital for the full amount. Because regardless, this needs to be done. But were you indicating that it should, at the end of the day, be offset by any settlement funds that we receive?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Because I would still rather take out the almost $10,000, or not 10,000, the almost $9,000 from our capital use, just in case, whatever reason, that insurance settlement number that we were given changes, which I wouldn't imagine why that it would, but the fact that it's not set in stone has me a little concerned.
Mhm.
So I will amend my motion to include that, that amount can be offset by any insurance settlement claims that we receive. So, but I still want to recommend the full almost 9,000 and take that out of our capital use, if that makes sense. So that's my amendment. Tim, you seconded the motion.
I'll second the amendment.
Second the amendment. Okay. So we're doing item number. Is item number 3. Danielle, do you have any comments on what we were talking about, or no?
No.
All right, with that, um, Tim, do you have any other comments on this?
I think we need to take the vote, but we need to take the main motion first and then the amended motion second. Procedurally.
Okay. We can do it like that. That's fine by me. So on the motion without the amendment, how do you vote, Danielle?
No.
You vote no? How do you vote, Tim?
Yes.
All right, I vote yes as well, so that was 2-1. With Danielle voting no. And on the motion as amended, how do you vote, Danielle?
Yes.
Okay. Tim, how do you vote?
Yes.
I vote yes as well.
That'll be number 7.
You looking at item number 7 now?
So that will be number 7 on our recommendation.
Yes, that'll be number 7 on our recommendations. Yes, thank you, Tim. For that. 8,700. All right, so we've got $67,225 approximately, but it'd be less than that. So is there anything else that we think should be in future years, or is there anything we can probably only recommend one good thing? Well, actually, what can we recommend that's left? Number 16 is higher than what we would have left. Number 15 is higher than what we would have left. Number 22 is higher than what we have left. I'm just saying these because there's no way we would be able to do that. Stand on blower, which is number 10. Number 9, the hydraulic 3-yard sander. Town hall window replacements, we could still do that. The skid steer loader, we can't, but it's $100,000. Do we want to recommend the skid steer loader for a future fiscal year? We've at least seen it. This is at least my second time seeing it, but I think we've seen it more than that. I just don't remember.
Yeah, I just don't see how we can't with what we have left.
No, we can't. We would have to recommend it to a future fiscal year. I know that we're leaning more heavily on the 2027 side for a lot of our items. Do we want to recommend the skid steer loader out to FY 2028?
I would say yes.
Okay. Danielle, what are you thinking?
Yes.
Okay. You can say no if you want to, Danielle.
No, it's okay. I'm just trying to put the big picture
I know,
into
it's-
one.
No, it's hard because you don't want to miss anything when you do that.
Right.
So. Does anyone want to make a motion on adding the skid steer loader to, what? Does anyone make a motion or move that the line item number 4 skid steer loader is put on the capital plan for 2028?
So moved.
All right. Does anyone second that?
Again.
All right, we have a motion and second. That was number 4. Yep. All right, is there any further discussion on the motion? Danielle? No. Tim? No. All right, with that, we'll go to the vote. Danielle?
Yes.
Tim?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. That was unanimous, 3-0. Let's go into 2028. With that, numbers 9, 10, and 11, and 14 and 21 are left that could be funded with the 67,000 that we kind of have available, that we haven't allocated yet. Since we're getting down this close and we can think about this, do we want to recommend a little bit over, like an extra, like if one thing falls through, then the next item on the list for FY 26 moves up? I would not recommend doing much higher than what we've got, or do we want to just stick right underneath our target numbers here? I don't mind either way. I'm just thinking out loud how we want to approach this.
Now I hear what you're saying. I'm looking at the balance here.
Yeah.
I'm putting a little higher precedent on line 11 and line 21.
Yeah,
In my mind, those are more urgent needs.
yeah, okay. Item, you said item 21, and what was the other one? 10?
11, the town
11,
hall
11,
windows,
town hall window replacement.
and
All right.
21, mitigate the bird problem at TES before it becomes a bat problem at TES.
Yeah, we don't want that.
We don't want that.
No, no, and I don't like that, so I really don't want that.
But they eat bugs. Birds do too.
No. They're fine. They just have to stay in their bat houses away
Mhm.
from us. Does anyone want to make a motion? So Danielle, are you thinking the same thing? The items number 11 and 21 are
Yeah.
kind of need to be on the list, all right,
Yeah.
for FY 26. All right. So does anyone want to move to recommend item number 11, town hall window replacement, and item number 21, mitigate the bird problem at Templeton Elementary School for our recommendations for FY 2026? You just moved that, Tim?
So moved, Tim.
All right. And I will second that. Is there any further discussion? All right. Seeing no further comments, how do you vote, Danielle?
Yes.
Tim?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Okay. Yes. It's 12,676. Right, so what I'll also say is, are we okay with ranking number 21 as item number 8, and then item number 11 as item number 9? Putting the bird problem before the window replacement.
I'm good with either order. I don't know what the weather and seasons have to do with mitigating the birds
Yeah,
versus replacing windows, which can virtually be done at any point in the year. Preferable not this time of year, but it could be done.
yeah. I mean, if we think they're about equal, we could rank them both number 8 if we think that they're about equal. Or we could do it. If we were going to do it, I would say deal with the bird problem and then deal with, yeah. Tim, are you all right with that?
Yeah, right.
All right, number 8 will be 21, and then number 9 will be number 11. All right, with that, we have about $34,000 left in capital to figure out. So is there anything even left that we can do on the list? Theoretically recommend. Now that bumps out number 14 because that's too high. Number 19 and 10. Number 9 and 10. Look, these are tough almost everything. So
I'm inclined to lead toward 9. If memory serves me correctly, the truck that they acquired recently was set up to accept this.
Okay.
And they do have an outstanding proposal for this sander with the hydraulic system as
yeah.
it was explained to us. That would just make good sense and something that is useful. And we're right into the time of year where a sander is a critical piece of equipment.
Right. And then, so we could do number 9. And then also number 10. I mean, those both would fit right within what we have left. So do we want to recommend items number 9 and 10 for fiscal year 2026?
Sure.
Okay. Danielle, how do you feel about that? Or what are you thinking? Because that would round out what we can do for fiscal year 2026. We still got to discuss how we want to recommend the others, but
Correct.
are you comfortable with that? Because that rounds out what we're able to do for the year.
Mhm.
Okay. So I would entertain a motion to recommend line item 9, hydraulic 3-yard sander, and item number 10, stand-on blower, for the fiscal year 2026 capital recommendations.
So moved.
Right. 9 and 10. Do we have a second?
Second.
So a motion's been made and seconded. Do we have any additional discussion or comments? Oh, Tim?
Nope.
Nothing? Danielle? All right, and I have nothing as well. So we'll go to the vote. Danielle?
Yes.
Tim?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Okay, so that round out. That kind of gives a buffer zone of about $7,000 or $8,000, depending on how everything lands. On the higher end of that spectrum. 49. But with that, how do we want to rank numbers 9 and 10? Does it matter what order? We could rank them both as 10 if we really wanted to. I don't really see a difference between recommending one over the other. But that's just my personal. Tim?
Makes no difference. to
Makes
me.
no difference to you, Danielle. All right, then I will list on them that they're both ranked at 10. So with that, items number 4, 14, 15, and 16. Oh no, we already did number 4. But items number 14, 15, 16, and 22 don't have any recommendations and are not planned out for yet. So what I'll ask with these final ones, are there any that the committee doesn't want to support? I think we had already I had already asked that earlier, but I just want to reiterate that. Or with any of these, is there any order of preference? We put a lot on fiscal year 2027 and 2028 in terms of plan out. How do we want to potentially recommend these moving forward? And this kind of isn't easy because like 3 of them. So besides number 14, which is a truck, numbers 15, 16, and 22, different locations, like 2 different locations, but they're all land improvements. And we're talking about the softball fence replacements. We're talking about fixing the infield mixes at Gilman Waite. And then we're talking about we need to upgrade the playground service at TES. So those are all similar. Well, those are all in the same category.
I personally feel like the fences should be considered first instead of the fields. Because the fences are technically a safety hazard. You
Correct.
go up there right now, half of them are curled at the bottom.
Right.
I can honestly say I haven't been to TS to see that surface area though, so.
Yeah, I would prioritize. Yeah, I would prioritize number 15. If we were gonna plan this out, like just thinking off of what I would think of is the fencing replacements. We could suggest that as a plan for FY 2027. The softball fields and the playground surfaces. Those are. Maybe that's a 2028 or 2029 recommendation.
I want to back the date up on the playground.
You want to back that up?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah,
that, the erosion over there is pretty significant.
okay. Hmm,
And the softball fields are still playable. It's not like there's something absolutely
Right,
wrong with
right,
it.
it's right, exactly. That can always be addressed at a later date.
Yeah,
Um, So then why? Again, this will be when we get our free cash numbers, when this committee gets its free cash numbers next year, that's gonna really affect what we do in FY 2027. But we could plan out that we need to do the fencing replacement and the playground surfaces at TES in FY 2027 if the committee was interested in that as a plan out. Again, that's all subject to what happens next year and what
Yep.
kind of projects we get and such, but at least we kind of start knowing we're gonna do it soon. We're supporting it sooner rather than later. So I don't know if anyone has any input on that.
I think we just reach a consensus on that. I don't think it needs a formal vote.
Okay,
'Cause
so,
we've pretty much exhausted what we have available.
Oh, no,
Now
no,
we're
no.
just looking, it's like, how do we start to rack them and stack them for
right, exactly.
coming years?
You know, we've exhausted. So on 15 and in 22 by consensus, do we want to just have that on the capital plan for FY 2027? Are you okay with that, Tim?
Yeah.
Okay with that, Danielle? All right. So that's what we will do for the capital plan, and that's 22. 27. What was the other number? 15. That's by consensus. Yeah. All right, so the last two that we need to discuss are items number 14, the Parks and Recreation truck, and then item number 16, the Gilman Waite softball fields infield mix. Like Danielle was saying, I mean, the infield's not great, but it's not unusable.
right.
It's not a safety hazard unlike any of the other things we've talked about. So I mean, 2028, 2029. I'm just kind of I just don't want to load FY 2027 so heavily when we
Right.
don't know what we're gonna get
Right.
requested yet. So
Do we know if there's any grants out there off the top of your head for infields?
I don't know if that would fall under the same grant that they're doing right now with Houghton Park in a sense. 'Cause that
Okay.
one comes up every year. That's the Parkland Acquisitions Grant. They're using, I mean, they can use it for a playground. I couldn't imagine why they can't use it to fix all of those fields. But again, that's dependent on the individual grant.
Yeah, it was just a question.
No,
I
no.
didn't know if you.
That's a
knew.
good question.
I don't know off the top of my head. That's a good question to follow up with.
I really think you can push, personally, I think you can push it out.
Yeah, I think we can push it out to like 28, 29.
Yeah,
Do we want to reach a consensus on that, Tim?
I'm fine with that.
You're fine with that? All right, so item number 16.
And if
Dan-
we find that departments can come up with some kind of other grant opportunities, they can always be revisited.
right.
Exactly. All right, so I will put that in the capital plan between 22 and 28 and 2029 for number 16, the Gilman Waite softball fields infill mix replacement. So number 16 by consensus. All right, so that leaves number 14, the Parks and Recreation truck. What are we all thinking about a recommendation for that? How do we want to plan that out? Does anyone have any thoughts?
Yeah, I just don't know how our fleet management and what's in the process of being cycled or phased.
Correct.
You know, can we take it from a high use to a lower use item and extend its life a couple years? I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, I don't have the answer to that either. I mean, we could. If it's possible to switch something out and that's feasible and it doesn't cost the town. Excuse me, more in terms of, gosh, what is that word? Trying to think of it. In terms of our maintenance costs, then I say that they should go for it, but if we have to plan it for it out of free cash, then I would lean more towards like fiscal year, I don't know, 2027, 2028. Maybe,
Agreed.
So is everyone okay with the consensus being that that's going, that if they can find a way to do it sooner, I'll mark that on the capital improvement plan, but it's going to be more planned out for the end of FY 2027 and for FY 2028 for that item. We go with that. Okay, you go with that, Danielle? Okay, then we'll do that by consensus. All right, so with that, I will update the capital improvement plan and our recommendations to include what we've done here tonight. Are there any comments additional? We have two comments that we have, one about the TCTV, one about the meals tax that we want to add to the report. Now that we've gone through everything and we've started to cycle through some of our thoughts.
I think just a general observation, this can go for all the departments and all the various commissions, committees, boards with oversight. Everything we saw presented was let's push it for this upcoming fiscal year, but I didn't see anything for the out years. I think a little better budgeting and planning and kind of forecasting our needs a little bit cleaner. I understand there's a whole bunch of stuff here. I'm not saying anything here is not valid and needed. But I'm looking at a lot of these. We've identified multiple items that we've seen 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe more times. So just a general observation. I think we can tighten up our forecasting and budgeting a little bit townwide.
And I agree with that, Tim. And you know what? It always says in the capital forms that to recommend what fiscal year you want it for within the out year. So it doesn't have to necessarily be this one. It could be, whatever in between. So we could, do we want to add a comment on that the select board and the entire town needs to consider more future planning? Because I know that
I'm inclined to say yes, I think we should, because if we look at our FY 26 on your totals, we had 2,481,211 some odd cents.
Right.
We were given a $300,000 to $325,000 working range.
right.
So we were like 2.1 million, almost 2.2 million in the hole before we started.
I would say just like because some of those things in that totals column are coming out of ARPA and they're coming out of other funds.
Well, regardless where we're funding.
Right, regardless of where we're
still a
funding from.
request.
Oh yeah, no, there's still a request but we're still well over
Oh, yeah.
$1.5 million in the hole, no matter what.
Oh, yeah.
No matter how you slice
And
it,
this is not a new scenario. This has happened the last 4 or 5 capital years that I can immediately recall. But I'm sure if we took a deeper dive, we would find out we're chugging along almost the status quo. I see an improvement opportunity.
Yeah. No, I see it too. I think that, maybe it should be in the committee's general comments that the department should start approaching us several years out, because then they've already gotten their information together. They're coming to us. We know that it's upcoming. It's more likely in planning it out like we've done this cycle. having it on this every single year, let's say they come with something for FY 2029 and we always, okay, you want it for FY 2029, bam, we're gonna put it right there because you're asking for it and you're the only one asking for anything out in 2029. Well, then they're more likely to get it by then since they've done the planning
Mhm.
stages getting to there. I think that we've got to approach it from what we're doing right now to start pushing them towards that. Because otherwise we're just gonna keep having the same problem that we've been having for the past several cycles. I'm inclined to put a comment like that on there. A comment to the effect of, everybody has been recommending, to the select board and, all departments. They've been recommending for, as immediately as possible, but possibly to look at all of their capital items and to seriously recommend what they can push out more than others. And I mean, all of them, even within their department priorities, they're all high priorities for most of them. So we've got to somehow push that point home. It's in the memo every year that we ask them to stage everything out. But I can make a general comment similar to what we do in the memo and hammer a little bit more in our committee's general comments if everyone's comfortable with that.
I'm good with it. I'm not trying to beat anybody up with it.
No,
It's-
I know.
It's just a general observation that it makes this committee's work. It's tough enough as it is,
Right,
but it just makes it a little tougher, knowing that we're walking in
right.
at,
Well,
at an extreme deficit to begin with and doing the best we can do with what we're given.
right. Well, and it's a comment, if it starts. And it's not just good for the select board to get these comments, it's good for the next committee to get these comments, because then they can look back at the support and say, hey, we're seeing the same issues. Nobody's doing anything. Do we want to make a stronger claim? If this keeps going on like 2 or 3 years out, it's like, okay, do we want to make a stronger claim and say, hey, during our presentation, this is in ongoing, like, this is not being resolved. This needs to be resolved. We can't go 2-3 years like this, where this is an ignored comment. It's not just an ignored comment, it's, an issue that's coming up that we always address through our memo every year. So, I mean, I would be inclined to put that as pretty much the same as what we put in the memo with, kind of just to throw that into the committee members' general comments, or the committee's general comments. Danielle, do you have any input on that or any thoughts? No. Are you so you're not against me putting that in? Are you against me putting that in,
No.
Danielle? Okay, do we want to, are you okay with me writing that into the report?
Yeah.
Comfortable with that? Okay. So we'll do that by consensus then. So I'll add that as the third and last comment regarding plan out. I'll just call it plan out, but I know what we had just discussed, so it's third comment.
Just make things easier.
Right. It's
See
just,
what people are also looking at too.
right, it just puts everything on the radar and then moving forward, we'll get there. With that, we've talked about everything on here. We're pretty much, I just have to update this report with everything that we've done tonight. And then I will give unless you're all comfortable with what we've done, that I'm including it, that I would include it in the report correctly. I can just have it as a draft for the selectmen and we can approve it right before we give the presentation next week, the final version. Or you can authorize me to finalize this and submit this to the select board. We've done it both ways before. It doesn't matter to me, but I can get this done within the next day or two. So you've already got all the pieces here, so. But we have to meet again anyway question is, are we all, so I know I'm gonna be at the presentation next week. Are you gonna be at the presentation? You should, yeah, because you're on the select board, you'll be, our presentation to the select board is on December 11th, so you'll be
Yes.
there, right, Tim? Yeah.
Yep.
Danielle, are you gonna be there that night?
I can be.
Okay, so we can either have a quorum of the committee there, vote on this final report right in front of the select board, although It'll be the draft that I include in their packet, although we may make minor changes if anyone sees anything that needs to be corrected typo wise, or you can trust me to just write this as is. I don't know. What do the committee members think?
I would present it as a draft, and if we need to make amendments on the fly, we do.
Okay,
We also want to have our meeting minutes from this meeting
at that
ready.
meeting, yeah,
So per the bylaw, we can approve the meeting minutes and prevent an OML like we had about 4 years ago.
yeah, so we can eliminate that. Yeah, I'll make sure that we'll make sure that that's ready. So yeah, Danielle, the presentation, it'll be soon after 6:30 on Wednesday next week. So we should be able to get through that. All right. So with that being said, I will draft this up. I will send the draft to everyone. I will submit this to the select board, and then we will meet again next week on December 11th. We're in committee member comments right now since we've done all of our other business. Tim, do you have any final comments for this evening?
No, it's been a pleasure working with everybody this year, and like I said, this is a very vital part of our budgeting process. And just looking, what are the true needs? What can we do? What can't we do, and why? And being able to convey that to the community at large.
All right. Danielle, do you have any comments?
Just that this was my first year on this committee and it was a very eye-opening experience.
The first year, honestly, Danielle, just to comment on what you just said, yeah, it's very eye-opening, and as you learn more about how the finances of the town work, you see how it all,
Comes to one.
yes,
Yeah.
and for better or worse.
Right.
You can say it, it's overwhelming the first time.
It is. It's just all at once. It's like, oh my goodness.
It's all the pieces behind the scenes that you don't really think about,
Yeah.
but here they are right in front of you. It's just like,
Absolutely.
I gotta think about this.
Yeah.
Right, I've talked enough. I have no other comments. With that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, I have a motion made. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, I have a motion made and seconded to adjourn. How do you vote, Danielle?
Yes.
Tim?